So this is part 3 of my Gangstalking overview or introduction, which began for me in a flurry of terror in 1992, autumn 1992, and I've dipped back into the past as well, prior to 92, to things that were part of the build-up that sort of went unnoticed at the time. And also I'm looking at what I've worked it out, or what I think I've worked it out to be in the years since, because it has been ongoing since then. And I wanted to start off this part by talking about brain or body implants, which some targeted individuals or abductees have found in their bodies. So I think that the long-standing TIs, abductees, have them in their brain primarily, but I don't think they need to do that anymore. That's very invasive. So those are people who've been abductees since the 1960s, maybe even before 1970s maybe. But I don't think that there's no need for that kind of invasive surgery anymore. And people in the years since have found implants in other parts of their body. More recently, they're finding them between their fingers, between their toes, in their arms, legs, anywhere really, and they seem to be just under the skin. And I think they all had the same aim, which was to tap into your body's electrical system, because we all have electrical circuitry, which is our nervous system loosely, and they wanted to tap into this. So in the late 1950s there was the researcher, scientist Jose Delgado, who put an implant into the brain of a fighting bull and used it to control it. So there's film easily available online. If you just Google his name, you'll surely come up with a short video clip of him controlling a charging bull. He stood in the bull ring with it. It charges towards him. He flicks a switch, presses a button, whatever, and the bull stops in its tracks a few feet away from him. So I think those were what the original implants were sort of trying to effect. I didn't have an implant in my head until 2015, and I was sat at like I am now, and all of a sudden there was a big nosebleed. I was already booked to go for a CT scan, so suspecting this was the case, as soon as I had them done, I asked for the CDs and paid, and they came in the post, and I looked at them thoroughly, and sure enough there's an implant in the back of my sinus cavity, sort of below my eye really. And what's a bit baffling about it is that it seems to be a long thin stick shaped, and they haven't squashed it into the tissue point down, they've just pressed it down flat. I can see it like all the granular tissue, the scar tissue where it's repaired over it. So it's small wonder there was a big nosebleed. They've just pressed it straight down in. So I think that because I was just sat here doing my thing, watching YouTube or something, I think there's an element of quantum jump and time slip in it, because that should have hurt. That should have hurt like Billy-O. So I think that mine is just it's just an RFID chip, I think, to geographically track me. And it's strange that they should do it then, because by 2015 they'd stalked me out of vehicle ownership again, so I'm not moving about very much. I said in one of the previous parts that when I first started driving and going around, I was followed by a fleet. Well, it wasn't the whole fleet all at once, but I always saw a silver Vauxhall Astra wherever I went. And I think now they've got red Vauxhall Astras. They've got an up-to-date fleet, and they all seem to get issued with the same cars. And I can remember that when it was the silver Astras back in the early noughties, they had, a couple of them had consecutive registration numbers, which was what really brought them to my attention, which, that was what made me notice them. So there's not really any need to physically follow me about, because they've built up a system of fake stars, drones and satellites, low-level satellites in the sky. So some of these people who've got these one-piece implants have had them surgically removed. There's a couple of doctors in America who've done this, and they find that these implants of various shapes and sizes have patent numbers on them and the manufacturer's name. So how can they say that they're alien? Well, they're alien in a sense, because if you look at the dictionary meaning of the word alien, it means something that's out of place, a foreign body. So they're alien to their bodies, but they're not put there by aliens, I don't think, because that would suggest that the manufacturers of the implants have got some kind of work contract with the manufacturers, and you would have thought that they would be admitting it, be saying we're making these implants and we don't know why, or that they would see something online about someone complaining about having an implant and they say, well, we made those, but they told us it was for pets, dogs and stuff. So you'd think that someone would speak up. If there wasn't some skullduggery about it, you would think that the manufacturers would speak up. So yes, some people have had them surgically removed, and because they've been put there against their wishes, really, aren't they? So these implants were originally to track brain activity and affect it. So Jose Delgado prevented the bull from charging. There's one or two people I'd quite like to charge at, my long-standing stalkers, and because their stalking antics have affected other people around me, I don't think anyone would flick a switch or press a button to stop me. So the implants, I think, have been made redundant really by nanotech, which some people are finding coming out of their skin in either crystals, shards of crystals that have got there somehow, small pieces of microdot material, or the like tubes of some kind of aerial really, that have constructed and replicated inside themselves, and they're coming to the surface through their skin. And then there's also smart dust. Now I think this is falling on us via chemtrails, as well as all the aluminium and chaff and stuff that's up there. I think we're being dosed with smart dust, which we're taking in, we're breathing it in. It's falling on our crops, on our water supplies, so there's no avoiding it. And all of these things are to control and affect us in every way. But of course the question is, why do they want this level of control? And I really can't think. It's beyond me why they would want to affect the personal freedoms of individuals. But I think originally they were trying to develop a system of non-verbal communication, so telepathy. But none of it succeeded really. I mean, if someone's got an implant in the body, that's detectable. If someone's got nanotech in them, that's detectable. And if someone's being tracked and traced with HARP, then that's detectable too. But originally I think the implants were linked HARP to mind reading. But nothing's been achieved really, because when you start looking around, there's the chemtrails are showing up on photographs globally. So what does this suggest? Does someone who's got an implant and is on the HARP system, can they be controlled by different factions, and possibly more than one at once? We don't know. When I went on my Italian trip, where I got myself off whatever I'm being drugged with, I can remember that my mobile phone went out of order for quite a while, quite a few hours, and when it did come back on, of course it was a different service provider. So are our implants working along the same lines? You know, are we moving networks if we're moving around geographically? That's what I'm wondering. So different people can have control of you in different places. Although some of my stalkers used to have national travel or international travel even, but they've achieved nothing in one sense, because everything that's been done to us can be detected. So their system of non-verbal communication works, yes, but it's all very hackable. It's all very hackable. So sometimes you get the feeling that there's more than one person trying to get into control, and that they're arguing about setting up situations, events, and how you're going to react to them. So it's almost like being at a scriptwriters meeting, and that, you know, they're setting up these events in your life, but they're arguing about the outcome or how it's going to be achieved. But these implants and HARP and nanotech, they can read our thoughts word for word. They can read what we see, what we hear, what we think, as well as what we speak, accurately, word for word. And so then they can so what they're doing is they're creating, as usual, they're creating the problem and then trying to provide the solution. But in this instance they're not, and this just leaves us TIs somewhere in nowhere really. They're just messing around with our health, our earning abilities, our lives in every way, or at least that's what I'm finding. Now, there is some kind of international agreement that HARP was not to be used for warfare in its weather modification aspects, but they can bounce microwaves off HARP, and they did use that in the Iraq conflict, but I think that was they were mounted on all-terrain vehicles, so they've sidestepped their own rule in a way. So really all that they can use the HARP with implants scenario with is for domestic situations, so domestic terrorism, mass shootings, and things like that. And so is it an experiment, or is this the way it is now? Have they done with experimenting, and this is how they're going to be? Now, some of the truthers I think are very powerful, and they can create situations to give themselves something to panhandle about, I think, because some of the truther networks have been set up by mainstream military. So whilst they're useful, listen to them and take in what they're saying. Some of them are complete setups. I came to that conclusion quite early on. There's just too much money going along with them. Even though they're panhandling, they never seem to be short of a bob or two in some situations. So I just think that they're using this for domestic terrorism and creating internal situations. But they can bend that rule by saying, well, we're all part of the UN, so they can affect other nations by their UN agreements and other military agreements, which makes them friends on the surface. So I think that some TIs might be getting a threat or compliance scenario in other words, if you do this, we'll let you go, or we'll release you from some of your stalking tactics or some of the due weapons and stuff like that. So they can force compliance of people's actions or force them to become involved. So by threat, they can make some TIs conform. In the late 1990s, they'd stalked me financially out of being able to run a vehicle. So I thought, well, you're not going to terrorise me you're not going to control me to that level by terror. So I got my bike out and I thought, well, I'm going to go to the pub on my bike. And this was the winter months, so it was dark. But they did sort of set up some things to try and frighten me off doing that. And I used to have to alter my route home once or twice. And one of the things they did was in a piece of woodland. It was only about 1.5 miles to the pub. In a piece of woodland, they projected a red dot onto a tree about 3 foot above my head as I was going past. Now at the time I thought this was the night sights of a gun of some sort, and I have been shot at in much later years, but I'm thinking that it was a laser of some sort, because in line with many TIs I've had hair stripping, hair pulling, hair thinning, the whole hair thing going on. I don't know what it's about, except the only thing I can think of is that if you pull hair out by the root, then I think there's useful DNA in there that can be used for fertility. There's enough DNA in it to create embryos. Yeah, so that's the only thing I can think about the hair stripping. It's either that or pure spite, one or the other, possibly both. So they can read your thoughts word for word. So when they're frightening you, they can enjoy it, which is great, isn't it? And every thought that you make is known to them if they want to be listening. So I sort of, because I've been watching YouTube and radio interviews and stuff online quite a bit, I thought I always look at the comment threads, and I found almost as much useful information in those as I have from the actual presentation. And I sort of thought, well, there's a theme forming perhaps on who they target, and they seem to go for musicians and artists and people with their own business. So I'm thinking that it's got to be something where there's likely to be intellectual property that they can steal, or a business concept, a business idea. They're going to go for people who would have succeeded and steal their success if they can in some way. So musicians, artists, creators, business people, people with a creative thought process, intellectual property, and they can also, just to goad you if they have stolen it, they can, or if it's something that they can't steal, they can preempt your next move and thwart it. And that, again, that seems like pure spite. Pure spite. Can't think of any other reason. So I'm going to wonder if this is affecting, because there's so many TIs, there seem to be new people. You're finding new people all the time in comment threads. Is this impacting the wider economy, really? You've got to think that, because I saw an article I only read the headlines, in one of the daily papers a few weeks ago, and it said that less than half, just under half of the UK population now are paying taxes. So that's not great. Where's that going? And partly that's going to be because of the demographics. The baby boomers are now retiring, and they've had less children than were in the previous generations. So there's an overbalance in the ageing population. But also, what percentage of the population are TIs? I think it's going to be a slice of a pie diagram by now, because there seems to be more and more people coming on, and those people they've been stalked out of employment and onto the dole queue. In my case, I just couldn't keep going with my self-employed business, and my self-employed business was something that I started as a result of my stalking, because they were making it hard for me to keep a job, impossible, nigh on. So, and I think one of the agendas of my stalking was that there was constant damage being done that kept my earnings below the tax threshold. So, even though I was self-employed and working and earning, I was still on working tax credits. So a lot of my stalkers, or the ones that I suspect, aren't employed themselves, and they seem to be trying to... They think their way of life's okay, and that your main aim is to try and get out of work, either at one extreme or the other. They're trying to make money by under the radar of the tax system, but they're just on benefits, and that gives them all the time in the world to stalk other people out of their contributing situations and ways of lives. So yes, so the harp and implants can put thoughts into our heads to make us feel how they want us to feel, and to suit or not suit the situation. So really, when I think about the cooker incident in 1992, I should have come home, found this cooker alarm blaring, and worked out how to deactivate the alarm in some way, whether by resetting the clock or cutting the wires even. It was a second-hand cooker, so it wouldn't have mattered if I'd have cut the wires. But instead it sent me into a complete schism, and really that's not how I would normally have reacted. I know I was beginning to get a bit hyped up because I was becoming pretty sure that I'd got home invaders whilst I was out at work. I was finding things moved, things gone, things returned, things broken, things damaged, tampered with. So I was beginning to get a clue, and it was a shock because it was beyond my understanding of how human beings behave towards one another. So, as well as controlling our thoughts and actions, they can control our bodily functions. So, smell, they can give you a sudden cough for a few days and then it goes away, and they can make like the beginning of a cold or flu, and then that goes away without developing into the proper thing. They can control your bowels, micturition, sight. I know when there's a microwave attack going on, you do get blurred vision, and I get that. So you just have to work around it and hope that it's just a microwave attack and that it will go away. So, and they're also saying that they can disguise the signs and symptoms of diseases. Now, this is quite a big concern, really, I think, because they're saying that they can disguise dementia. So on the one hand, there's all this aluminium up in the air, which is falling down at night time, and we're taking it in whether we like it or not. I mean, I try not to go out at night because I think that's when it comes down low. So get the house sealed up and stay indoors. But the concern is that the figures for dementia are rising, but are we seeing the true figures? If they're disguising it in a percentage of the population, and they suddenly decide, well, we've had enough of that, what's going to happen? How many people are affected without knowing it? So I can remember in the early to mid 1980s, this big news came out in all the papers saying that aluminium caused dementia, and we were to throw out all our aluminium saucepans because that was where our intake was from. What a ruse. I know that my mum did get rid of her saucepans and bought some new ones. We went to stainless steel and ceramic, enamel, I think. So was that just to get our saucepans off us so they could powder them down? You've got to think that, haven't you? You've got to, knowing the devious way that some of this carries on, was that an initiative to to get more chemtrails, to get more aluminium for chemtrails. You just don't know. So the street theatre, I think, because of their ability to read our minds and hear and whatever, everything we're doing, I think the street theatre and directed conversation can go on around. So what I'm doing, thinking, seeing today can come back to me in 2 or 3 days' time in a piece of street theatre. Someone might say, making a recording, unquote. And it's not necessarily the person you're talking to. Sometimes if you're in a situation or a crowd, someone who's talking to someone else will do it within earshot of you. And you know what it is by now. But they're just trying to creep you out by letting you know that they know your every move. So, and I think, so that, like the street theatre and directed conversation, it'll come back to you in 2 or 3 days' time. But if they are genuinely putting things into TV programmes and advertising, then that's going to be a slower process, because what's in production now, they might get a piece of directed conversation telling them to add something or include this. That's going to be a few weeks before that comes back to you. So that's less effective, because you might have forgotten what you were doing today by then anyway, and it's not, without the radio waves making you feel anxious, I think that the directed advertising is more likely to pass you by. I can see it now, but without any emotional effect, and I can see it for other people, strangely. And I think, oh dear, are they getting the fear, terror beamed at them as well to go along with it? But you know, I don't know. So yeah, they can predict, preempt, and spoil everything that you're planning to do. So the controlling of our bodily functions goes to another level when they say that they can affect our communication skills. So they're trying to create non-verbal communication on the one hand, but they're also trying to affect our verbal communications on the other. Now, this is a big thing, because what I've discovered is, of course, that they can affect our ability to say yes or no. Now, as a woman, I've had the you said no but you meant yes thing done to me quite a few years ago now, and so when you consider that if you've got missing time, what are you doing in your missing time, where are you? Or if, like me, you know you're pretty sure you're being drugged and hypnotised and abducted without going anywhere, if they can do forced speech on you whilst you're in another situation, another state of mind, then they can force consent to do whatever they want to do to you. So they're taking away your informed consent. So under hypnosis or drugs, you can be doing forced speech and agreeing to whatever they want to do to you. In a mild form compared to what other things that I suspect. A few months ago I had the logbooks for a couple of sawned vehicles stolen, and I can only think that they've been stolen out of my handbag whilst I slept. So I was drugged, slept, I say sleep, but I don't know whether that's really what it is. So they might have invaded my house while I'm in this altered state of mind, gone through my handbag, I know they do because I can smell them, got these vehicle logbooks and said, can I have these? And then by forced speech I might have said yes. But it's no, of course, no, you may not have the logbooks to my vehicles. And I know some of the operatives around me, so I put word out into the circle of them that I was aware that the logbooks had been stolen, and I sort of let it go for a few weeks in the hope that they would return them via the same means as they stole them, but they didn't come back to me. So ultimately I contacted, because I found the garage containing one of the vehicles had become unlocked on its own. So I contacted the police and I said, I've had these logbooks stolen, I've not transferred the ownership or sold vehicles to anyone in any way. And he looked it up and he said, no, they're still registered to you. And I said, well, they're to stay that way, because I'll sell them or dispose of them as and when I think fit. They're mine. I've not consented to anything. So you've got to think, that's a fairly mild, for instance, in what they can do with forced speech, forced compliance in a drugged or abduction situation. Sexual abuse, the hair stripping, of course, body modifications, mutilations. They can get your consent. And I've got to say that everything that's been done to me has been detrimental, and none of it would I agree to. So, just for the record, I'm going to say that no, I do not consent. Everything that's been done to me has been to make me look worse. So, I was bullied about my looks in school. I think the idea was to make me insecure and easy, but it didn't work. I was happy with the way I looked. If it didn't suit them, well, it's just tough, don't look at me. I'm not that self-conscious, so I was happy with the way that I looked. So I've bought drug test kits online. I think you can get one for about £10 or a bit less, and it tested for the 8 most common recreational drug groups, and I've done it a couple of times and I've got no result from them. But some people have discovered that they've got GHB, is it in their system, which is some kind of a date rape drug, or ketamine, I think, which was originally something used for horses, I think. So some people, it's worth doing. If you think you're being drugged and you don't know what, it's probably worth doing. Other things, I'm understanding, other recreational drugs, they've gone out of your blood system in 28, 48 hours or whatever, but they're going to be in your hair. So they're going to be in your hair for the life of your hair or your toenails. So there are longer term ways of detecting if you've been spiked with someone. But the question is, if you are being drugged, what are you doing in your missing time? And that's where this forced compliance, forced speech can be used. So they have to get your consent for things that you would not consent to. So, yeah, hair stripping, rape, sexual abuse. Oh, another thing, because they steal off you, I get the impression that they like to steal things and then get your fingerprints on what they've stolen. So they're trying to involve you in their crimes. So, yeah, I think that they probably would press your hands on too, and frame you up, I suppose, for crimes of thefts and goodness knows what that they can make you grasp onto against your wishes or knowledge. And then at the worst case scenario, I think that there's an element of organ trading quite possibly going on, because they can do seamless surgeries, and I think that's why another reason why they showed the laser dot on the tree trunk all those years ago, and they can use time slip for that. So mutilations and organ trading, so they would swap organs. If you've got something that's functioning well and somebody else hasn't, they'll do a swap. And for some people, I don't think they bother to do much cross-matching. I honestly don't. I think I've seen people, who are slowly rejecting organs that they've had transplanted onto them. Of course, if they do that then means that they need to be visiting you regularly in your zonked out hours to administer a rejection medication to you. And on the subject of medication, they do like to get their hands on prescription drugs. I'm pretty sure of it. So they've got a double whammy going on there, because in case they get caught in their antics, they're quite likely to have got themselves signed off as mentally ill, having mental health issues. So they've got a prescription for psychiatric drugs, but they're not taking them themselves. they will quite likely be spiking their target with them. And by the same token, any drugs they get their hands on, and they don't seem to be able to read. They don't seem to be able to observe the internal or external use thing. So in recent weeks, I've had a tube of scented body lotion emptied out and replaced with something that didn't have much scent to it. And I think one of the things that they've used on me, internally and externally, is what used to be called Betnovate. I don't know whether that still goes, and it's a drug for eczema. But if you use it for years and years and years, the same as your heat treatment creams, it will thin your skin. So yeah, anything, they've got endless patience when it comes to damaging your health, seemingly. If something takes years to have an effect, they don't mind that. So yeah, getting hold of prescription drugs, other people's prescriptions, or spiking you with their own and going to the doctor saying they've lost it. And I think they've got this network of people who keep losing their prescriptions, and I think that's why targeted individuals are made to lose money. It's all like win and lose as far as they're concerned. So yeah, so on the record, I was happy with the way I looked. I don't care if people didn't like it. I did. So they can't get your consent by fair means, so they're going to use forced speech, drugs, hypnosis to get your compliance. I have done forced speech knowingly, or I'm pretty sure, as far back as the mid-1970s, and what I can say about it is that there was no thought process before I spoke. The words just came out of my mouth. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to say that. And it's not something that you do consciously, usually, but it just, out of my mouth and it came out. And it was out of character for me, and that's why it stayed in my mind, really, I suppose. So this means that they can mess with your whole life, every aspect of it, the yes and no, and your feelings, and your freedom to love, which is another contradiction, really, because some of my stalkers are these dirty hippie types, so you sort of think about the summer of love and flower power and all that, but if you're being forced to comply and do things, sexual acts, against your wishes, that's not freedom. That's not freedom. Do they understand what freedom is? Quite possibly not. So it's not free love, because it's against your wishes. It's things that you wouldn't do. So yeah, being raped with drugs and hypnosis isn't free love, because it's not free will, and no means no. Which bit of that do they not understand? No means no. So it was a big shock for me in 1992 that people could think or act that way, and I've sort of working it out now. I try to anticipate what's the worst next move that can happen, and then you've got yourself braced for it. So if it does happen, it's not such a big shock. If it doesn't happen, all well and good. And they can warn you years in advance of what their intentions are. So, you know, I've gradually learned not to think that because it hasn't happened in a few weeks of my realising it, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen at some later date. But when you've been a targeted individual as long as I have, you can sort of start to anticipate their next move. You can work out their modus operandi and sometimes sidestep it. So I think the affecting your free will and your ability to say no in an altered state of mind is the biggest piece of information I'm giving out here. For anyone who's got missing time, you sort of think missing time's nothing much, but it's probably the biggest concern, really. And I think that when they steal off you, that's a way of telling you that you've got missing time, but you perhaps haven't noticed yet. It was quite a while before I did notice, and it wasn't until I had the going home from the pub party incident, and that was, I'm going to say 1990, I'm not sure, 1990, 1991, really not sure. So the brain mapping can be done all our lives, possibly. To what extent in my childhood and infancy, I don't know. Whether I been developing along with their technology, and they sort of update it as they're going along. But I think with people born, so I think if your life goes like a bad soap opera, they're putting you through all your emotional paces, and they're making a dossier or a file of all your emotions and the wavelengths that you give off when you're feeling them. So then they can play them back to you in different situations, play back the emotions to make you overreact, or sometimes it's completely not connected with the situation that you're in. They can make you angry for no good reason, a sudden outburst, which, is that what happens with the mass shooters? I don't know. But you can make a fair guess. When you start to piece it all together, you can begin to make a fair guess. So I think that the people who are coming onto the system now, and they can start with children, they can start from day one, if not before, they're brain mapping them and building a dossier on their emotions. And of course your emotions change over your lifetime, or how you display them, or what triggers you to feel certain things. But they're going to have the map of you going back to your childhood. So my thoughts on that is that to a toddler, 2-year-old, the loss of a comfort blanket is a major thing. There's going to be tears, wailing, much wailing, no rest until it's found. You're expecting the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse to show up and help you look for it, and that's absolutely terrible in their world. But that can be recorded and then played back at a later date as something that wouldn't have such a very big effect. So they can amplify how you react to situations later on in your life. So, for instance, if you didn't get the exam grades you were hoping for or expecting, you're going to be down in the mouth about it, but you're not going to go baby blanket about it. Comfort blanket about it. Same as not passing your driving test the first time, or the end of your first relationship. So your life you calm down emotionally once you get into your 20s, but I think they can really have a good go at you in your teens when your life there's lots of decisions and emotional decisions and choices to be made. So yeah, I think they can affect you and set you off on a wrong course at the right time. To comfort blanket about it. Same as not passing your driving test the first time, or the end of your first relationship. So your life you calm down emotionally once you get into your 20s, but I think they can really have a good go at you in your teens when your life there's lots of decisions and emotional decisions and choices to be made. So yeah, I think they can affect you and set you off on a wrong course at the right time to affect the rest of your life, really. So I think that's why that they break or steal things from targeted individuals that have no market value. It seems like pure spite, but they know that they're things that are memorabilia or sentimental things, and it seems like pure spite, but I think that they're recording how you respond to it, how it affects you emotionally, and also it's almost as if they can't bear to think that you've ever been happy. Once they start making your life a misery, they don't seem to like it that you might ever have been happy, and that you have those items that represent happy memories. And I don't quite understand that, beyond it being pure spite, which is, I can't understand how anyone can put that much effort and time and effort into pure spite, but of course they've got all the time in the world. So I think that's really all I wanted to say. I think I've hopefully said some quite important things, and I hope that this has been helpful. Long-standing TIs will sort of know a lot of this, but perhaps they haven't linked it up as to how all the different agendas that there seems to be with stalking worked, or they haven't realised the implications of some things that seem minor, but when they're put side by side with other aspects of stalking, you realise that they do have an evil agenda. That's all I've got to say about it. And for new TIs, I hope that I've provided a starting point for research. If you're going to go that way, if your stalking's so disruptive that you can't get on with your life, and that it can sort of speed you up out of the bewildering stage, because it is total bewilderment in the beginning. I think newer TIs are lucky in one sense because they've got the internet nowadays, and you can quite soon get online and find out what it's called, what's going on. Back in 1992, when it started for me, the internet wasn't widely available, and I didn't discover the word gangstalking until 2013. And then, I'd got a little netbook that I had on a Roman stick with limited access each month, and I happened upon the word, and I was still working, so I didn't have much time to look into it. I was trying to keep body and soul together. So it wasn't until 2014, when they stalked me out of employment, that I've been able to try and piece it together, and really this has been an overview of what I've worked out. So up until 2013 I thought that it was a hate campaign of some sort, and that I wasn't aware that other people were involved, really, that it was affecting other people. And I can remember back in the 1992 terror era, one of the things they used to do was place items in where I was going to see them. So a newspaper would be open and draped over a chair or something they wanted me to see, and I can't remember where I was, but there was a book left open, and you just glance at it and you think, can't be bothered with this really. But it was talking about Masonic hate campaigns. So I didn't stop and read it. I thought, okay, so I know that such things can happen. I'm just going to bear it in mind and move on. So, you're completely bewildered and you're wondering whose initiative it is and where it's coming from. So I think understanding it can eliminate the fear, in a sense. And outside of can eliminate the fear, although coming to the realisation that people could think and act that way is a frightening thing. The state of their minds, really, I suppose, is quite frightening, because it's everything removed from being a decent human being. But if you're having the radio waves beamed at you, that's all the fear is. And you can pick this up on photographs now, because there'll be all these little googly cartoon things. For some reason they like to project them as images of googly cartoons, and I found those going back to the early 1980s in my pictures. So I am a long-standing TI, even longer than I knew. So the street theatre directed conversation can be helpful sometimes, because there is more than one side to your stalking, and the one side is trying to tip you off about things. It's helpful information. So don't think that everyone that's doing something weird to you is the enemy. You can't tell me that people willingly want a sudden burst of voices as they're walking down the street, voices in their head as they're walking down the street, or you can't tell me that everyone's willing. I know that some people find it entertaining or in the moment, but they're probably not understanding what they're a part of. So they seem to enjoy it, but only purely because I don't think they know just how dark the agenda is. So, is this a global terror system? There seem to be TIs from all over the world online. And recently I found a couple of uploads from a man called Stu Webb. Now, he was uploading in 1993, or he was making it was a video cassette in those days, and someone's uploaded it onto YouTube, Stu Webb, and he was saying that terrorism was part of an agenda to cause domestic ructions and that it was government and military who were setting it off. So, is it depopulation? I mean, when your stalking gets that disruptive, it can stop you from having a family or a family life. I don't know. Or whether it's just global terror to usher in a military takeover. But I think that happened in some ways decades ago. But this Stu Webb is quite interesting. He says it as it is, I think. Whether he's a controlled opposition or not. Well, this is the end of part 3. I hope it's been useful. I've pushed on and got it all done. I think this is going to be the best part of an hour when I've finished it and edited it. But if you've managed to stick through the white noise that's still going on, I thought it was less today, but it still sounds the same when I play back my recordings. But if you've stuck with it, thanks very much for listening.